Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation on the Boss of the SOC version 3 dataset. My name is Chris Ogden and I will be your presenter today. And what I am trying to accomplish with this video is to basically plug a gap that I observed when I was going through the bots dataset. And that was a general lack of support or help out there on the internet to guide you through any of these exercises. That's not really on Splunk, mind you, because this is a capture the flag after all. And so there's no real expectation for very much assistance. But after the capture the flag events, the bots dataset is really good for honing your Splunk skills and trying some new tricks and stuff like that. So that is what I'm trying to do here today. I'd like to try to create a guided walkthrough of that dataset so that those of you who may be new to Splunk or new to these bots events may have a general idea of what you're getting into. Now, I really like bots, but one thing about the team competition is you typically only see a fraction of the data set in a really short amount of time. And with 4 people tackling questions, I felt like I was missing out on a lot of the finer nuances of the questions. So I decided to stand up my own bots v3 server and then tackle the questions all by myself without any sort of timer or competition or anything like that. And since I couldn't find any support for any of the questions when I was going through it, I decided to create my own video, this video, in the hopes of helping out anybody else who's trying to do bots and is also struggling. To begin your journey into bots, you have to first stand up your own Splunk server. It's free, it's easy, it's next finished. And from there, you go over to the bots GitHub page and you follow all their instructions and you have the bots data set inside of your Splunk instance. Then you go over to the bots CTF page, follow all their instructions, and you mostly have the bots competition set up, which should look something like this more or less. I'm gonna skip over the actual setup. There's other videos in there, and it's also really well documented, so I'm not gonna go through all that stuff. But once you've got everything set up, this is more or less what a bots CTF competition screen would look like. Um, Full disclosure here, I did not have a perfect install when I was setting this up. So I actually can't submit questions or I can't submit answers to any of these questions, but I have the questions, answers, and hints files, and I have the data, which is really all I need. I don't really care about the score or the time, so I'm just going to walk through it anyways, and I'm going to use a lookup table to sort of bridge that gap because I didn't install it perfectly. But normally when you're doing an actual competition, you'll be over here and you'll click into each question and normally here's like where you can submit the answers and stuff and you can request hints. I'm going to be doing that through lookup tables because mine's half busted, but this is basically the core of it here is you pick the question and then you sift through the data set and try to answer those questions. And like I was saying before, since my install is kind of busted, this is how I'm going to be requesting hints. It's just through some cheap little macro I made that's doing a lookup. And answers is the same way. If you ask Splunk for these files, they will give you those files which you need if you want to set up your own Splunk instance. So for example, our first question here is what is the name of the company that makes the software that you're using for this competition? Answer is 6-letter words, no punctuation. The answer is obviously going to be Splunk. And then you just enter your answer and then you submit it. And normally you get something besides an error page like I was saying before. So the answer is obviously 1. So that's basically my super high speed intro into just getting things up and off the ground. From here forward, we're actually going to walk through the analysis of some of these questions to try and see how you get to the answers. And so we'll pick it back up from the next question. So the next question is actually question number 200. Questions numbers 100 and 101 are just part of the demo, I guess. So we're going to start here with question 200. And it says list out the IAM users that accessed an AWS service successfully or unsuccessfully in Frothy's AWS environment. And so we'll need to open up a search bar here to get started. Now, a lot of people, the first thing they're going to come in here and do is they're just going to do index equals star, source type equals star, and just start stumbling around for whatever they can find. And that is one way, and it seems like it's the fastest way, but you end up having to manually filter out through a bunch of noise. So my personal approach is to sort of figure out where you want to head first, do as much of the searching at a meta level as possible. And the way I do that is through a couple commands that I use pretty frequently called metadata and meta search. So to give kind of an example here, metadata type equals source types, index equals bots v3, value source type. It's just going to give me a quick list of all the source types that I have available. And it runs really quickly and shows you basically all of your options. You can kind of think of this as like a campaign map where you're like looking at everywhere you can possibly take this question. This question in particular was talking about AWS stuff, and we see a whole bunch of AWS source types. So these are probably where we want to search. And the question was looking for IAM users that have successfully or unsuccessfully accessed the frothy AWS environment. So we're gonna try and look for that activity, but we're gonna go one level down, but we're still gonna stick with the meta command. So the next one I'm going to show you is the meta search command. And so what the meta search command is going to do is you're not actually going to be querying the logs. You're more going to be looking at like the lexicon and the journal files and all that stuff. And it doesn't return the data. It more returns really what I get out of this is the source types that I want to look at and the event counts. But this allows you to search for keywords, maybe like login, I guess. And helps really to figure out where you want to direct your attention. So if you have any sort of familiarity with AWS logs, you know that CloudTrail is basically the audit version. So that's probably where we want to start looking for something like login activity. It's always good to just sort of put a cap on your search. And here you can start to look at some of the field value pairs that you have in here. And so we're looking for something about users, so maybe we just want to focus on fields that have something to do with users. Just kind of to narrow it down a little bit so we don't have to go sifting through all those fields. And we can click through here and look for something that's useful. And here we see something that's useful. This is relevant to the question. The question was list out the IAM users that access an AWS service. Here we have a user type called IAM. So this is probably pretty good criteria for us to add to our search. So here we're looking at about 5,000 results or so. And so we basically just need a list of users. So go back down here, just grab these usernames. And so this is basically the answer. It's basically the answer, but if I want to get fancy, I can condense it down and clean it up just so I don't make any mistakes with the copy pasting. So values will sort of make sure that it's only showing me unique values. It'll look something like this. And then I will remove that multi-value field. So this is probably something I could copy paste in there, and just because I like to be fancy. So they wanted a comma separated list of users. Now I have a comma separated list of users. So this is what you would paste here. But since mine's busted, I'm going to have to actually ask Splunk what is the answer to question 200. So the answer to question 200 is the same one that we just had. So we have the correct answer. And I find it helpful even after I've answered the question to actually go and look at the hints just to see if we were doing it correctly. I have it here already. Yeah, so use CloudTrail as a source type and key in on the user type field. So that's what we got here. So looking at the CloudTrail logs for user type IAM, and then we're just making a list of usernames. So that's it for question 200. So we're going to pick back up with question 201. What field would you use to alert that AWS API activity have occurred without MFA? Before I actually start to drill down into this question, I'm going to take a brief detour just to cover macros. I find that for this particular question, the field summary command is going to be really, really useful. But that can be used for basically all the questions. And so whenever you run into a circumstance where you're reusing a chunk of code, you want to use something called a macro. For anybody who's unfamiliar with the term, a macro is essentially a chunk of stored code that you can reuse instead of just typing it out each and every time. And I'll give you two real quick examples. So far, we've been pulling our hints through an input lookup because my install's busted. But if you plan to do this repeatedly over and over, you can convert this into something like a macro, like this. And I'll show you what powers this in a minute. And what the macro does, oh, I gotta put the pipe in front. What the macro does is it just expands out into the code. It's basically kind of like copy paste sort of. And so I can do this for the answers as well. And I will do this again for the field summary command, but only after I've showed you sort of where this is headed. It's good to do it manually at least once before you start to rely on the macro. And so to begin, we're going to go do a little bit of scoping for some sort of AWS logs, and then we're going to look for some sort of field with MFA type stuff. So let's start out just by asking, let's see here, what source types I have available to me, and I do that through the metadata command when I spell it correctly. And so these are all the source types that I have available to me. I probably want to go after the AWS ones. So I'll switch over to the meta search command and I'll pull AWS CloudTrail, which is Amazon's version of sort of like an audit trail, which hence the name. So that's probably where I'm gonna want to start my search, and then I'll use meta search to tell me about that source type without actually pulling back all of that data. So I'll run it, and I'm working for about 6,500 logs, which is not too bad. So at this point, I feel like it's pushing it a little bit, but I could probably drop the meta search command and start to interact with this data directly. Always good to have just some sort of a head command here so you don't blow anything up. But if you've worked with AWS logs much, they tend to be kind of difficult to work with because they're in JSON. So rather than sift through a JSON entry or just try and pick through all of these fields, because there's a bunch, I am fond of the field summary command, which is like a bird's eye view of the data that you're looking at. The problem that I find with the field summary command is that it has a lot of extraneous data and it's just not condensed enough for what I need. So I can repeatedly try to condense it down to make it a little bit easier for me to read. And then I can filter out some of the garbage data in here like that. Just clean it up a little bit. And it's a lot better. I can get a decent feel for all the data, but it's just there's a lot of extraneous information that I don't need. So what I like to do is to use the rex command to sort of use regex to pull out the just the fields. I don't care about the count right now. I just want a feel for the values that are showing up in this data. So what I'll do is this, which will use regex on the field called values, this column here, and it will allow it to match multiple times because this is a multi-value field. There's lots of things in here that I want to pull out. And it will evaluate based on this regular expression, which is basically looking for the word value followed by quote, colon, quote, and then it will match anything that's not a quote until there's a closing quote, which is really confusing to say. So it's just basically looking for what's between the quotes here. That's all it's doing. And when it runs, it looks like this on the right. It's much easier, much more condensed for me to read. And this is giving me a good bird's eye view of the data. And so basically from here down is it something that I plan to use frequently to give me sort of a bird's eye view of the data that I'm working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to throw it into a macro so that I can reuse this code whenever I want. And to do that, you just go to Settings, Advanced Search, and you go to Search Macros. It'll already be here because I made this already. But if you wanted to make a new one, you do new search macro, I'll call it bird's eye view too, just for demo purposes. Paste in the code that you just made and hit save, and that's really all there is to it. So I had built it already before, but what I could have done is just replace all this code with that macro that I just made. And it works the exact same way. So this is something that I'll use repeatedly throughout most of the questions. Now getting back to the main question that we're looking for here is we're looking for multi-factor. So what I will do is I'll just say search field equals anything with MFA in it, just see if I get any hits. And there's 2. So what I can try to do is look at these fields in relation to this particular event type. By event type. So I just want to sort of contrast them against one another. And so here is probably the best way that I can verify that this is my correct answer is this top row here is for APIs, and only this one here is showing up for that. That one doesn't show up for any AWS API calls, only console logins. So I want to discount this one and submit MFA authenticated as probably the correct answer. So again, this was question 201. So I'll come over to my answers macro and paste that in. And this is what I think the answer is MFA authenticated. And the answer is correct. That is correct. So that's how we get to a 1. It's always helpful to go back and look at the hints just for the learning opportunity. So we used AWS CloudTrail. Reading the documentation is pretty valuable, especially when it comes to AWS stuff. And here they're saying to exclude console login activity. So kind of like what we were keying in on the API calls, that's what they're recommending here too. The fact that we were able to do some initial scoping early on with the meta search command and the metadata command allowed us to avoid taking this hint, and using the field summary to pick out the 2 MFA fields allowed us to avoid taking this hint as well. And that's how we came up with this answer here. So we're going to pick back up with question 202. What is the processor number used on the web server's answer guidance? Include any special characters, punctuation, etc. So what is the process number? I'm going to try and speed this up a little bit just because each question is taking a while and I want to try and get through as many as possible. So I'm going to pre-type some of these out here. We'll start like we normally do with some scoping. Just show me some source types that I have available to me. And I'll look for something in here that sounds like it's hardware related. And there's actually a source type called hardware. So that's probably a good place to start. The OS query stuff's probably another good place to look. And there's two approaches. You can either search all at once or you can search individually. This is probably a good one. So I'll search individually for right now, and I'll say use the meta search command just to get a feel for the volume of the data. And when I run this search, I only get 3 results back, so I'm not going to do the bird's eye view or anything like that. I'm not going to do exploratory field analysis. I'm just going to pull all 3 events and look at them manually because it's not a lot. And here, looking at the hardware source type, it basically describes to us the CPU information. And if there was more data, we could do more to extract this. But since there's only 3 and we see all 3 are exactly the same, this is the CPU number or the processor number. So we'll take this. We'll go back and see if it'll take for our answers here. This is for question 202. And we're looking for E5 2676. Which is correct. So that's how you get 202. And let's take a quick look at the hints. Use hardware as a source type. Yeah, so that's 202. Question 203. Bud accidentally makes an S3 bucket publicly accessible. What is the event ID of the API call that enables public access? So our answer is going to be an event ID. We're going to be looking for S3 bucket policies. So just like before, we'll start off with a little bit of scoping. I'll do my metadata command against the bots index, and I'll narrow it down to the AWS source types again. And again, I'm probably going to want to go through CloudTrail. If you are not super familiar with CloudTrail or AWS in general, you could just cast a wide net and look for a keyword, which is what this is doing here. You're just saying meta search across all AWS source types for anything that's got the word bucket in it. And that'll give you 4 source types, of which CloudTrail is one, and it's also the majority. The problem with that approach is it's not very friendly for wildcarding your search terms. And so there's a really high chance that bucket may be a partial string. But when in doubt, you can always go with CloudTrail because it is basically like the AWS audit log, and it has a lot of good information here. And so I'll go look at that manually. And I'll just say search the CloudTrail for anywhere where there's a bucket. This gives me some event names, which, as I discussed in the previous question, kind of give you an overview of sort of what is going on with that event. But we can see here that bucket is in the middle of these strings, so we'll probably just want to wildcard this and see if we get any additional event names. Again, the wildcards are to account for bucket showing up in the middle of the string here. And so we get some additional events that contain a bucket, and we'll look through these, which one sounds most applicable to the question, accidentally making an S3 bucket publicly accessible. It's definitely going to be a put instead of a get, and put bucket ACL sounds really appropriate. So let's go look at that. And so I'm dropping the stats and I'm saying just show me the event names with put bucket ACL, and this is that. So there's a request parameter. It sounds interesting, so we'll come in here and look at that. And the ACL is definitely what we want to look at. Here's the bucket name. The ACL looks like it's empty. A lot of times you see that and you wonder, is it like a parsing error or something? So when it comes to JSON, you can just click show as raw text to verify it's not some sort of parsing error. It's ACL. That's how it is in the actual data. So it's a blank ACL, which sounds pretty appropriate for the scenario described. But there's two events, not one. So we'll probably want to go with the first one. And so just to make it easier, I can toss it into a table here with the time. And I have the event name, the empty ACL, and I will probably just pick the event ID that came first by about an hour. And this was, what question was this? 203. So say for 203, that is the correct answer. And we want to just look at the hints for learning opportunity. And the only hint available is to use CloudTrail. So that's 203. Question 204. What is the name of the S3 bucket that was made publicly accessible? This is the same bucket that was in 203, and we stumbled across that when we narrowed it down anyways. Put bucket ACL. Here it is, bucket name. So bucket name is Frothy Web Code. And so we'll just check that to see if that's the right answer. And it is. And the hints, same as the previous one. So that's 204, pretty straightforward. Question 205, what is the name of the text file that was successfully uploaded into the S3 bucket while it was publicly accessible? So we want to pull out some keywords here. Text files going to be important. Uploaded is good. S3 is probably something we could search for. Bucket as well. Since this sounds like it's related to the previous one, we can, if we wanted to, we could take the timestamp of the other answers and look for events that happen after that if we want to. I'm just going to press forward anyways. So just like before, we start with a little bit of scoping. So I want to stay with the AWS logs. And for this one, I would probably lean towards the S3 access logs because somebody externally uploading into your buckets sounds more like a access control type thing than an audit type thing. But if we weren't sure, we could fall back on our trusty meta search command like this and just search around for some of our keywords that we're looking for. So we're looking for a text file that was uploaded to the S3 bucket. So we could say texts, see what we get. That drops us down from 11, I think, to 3. And not a lot either, so I could probably just narrow it down here. If I wanted to, I remember the bucket name that was made public was Frothy Web Code, so I could put that in here as a keyword if I wanted to. I got more actually. So let's just pull these. 23 events is not a lot of events. But because we have we had 4 different source types, now we only have this one. So this makes it a lot easier. And there it is. So that was pretty easy. If we wanted to, yeah, they're all the same. Open bucket, please fix that txt. If we wanted to, we could figure out what field that shows up in, which is key, and then come over here and just look at the key field. And it's the only file that appears to have been uploaded, so we'll take this as our answer. 205. Yes. And the hints for 205. Access log. Yes, that's 205. 206. What is the size of the tar.gz file that was successfully uploaded to the S3 bucket while it was publicly accessible? So tar.gz is definitely going to be really, really important for the search. We're also still working with that same S3 bucket so we can build upon the work that we've done so far already. In fact, I'm just going to go back to my previous answer and keep looking through this. So I'll drop txt. I'll probably keep this unless it's a key value pair, which it probably is. Yeah. So bucket name equals that. And I'll just look at all activity for that bucket just to keep things safe here. 158 events, not too bad. I remember the text file was in the key field, so I'll say show me all the keys. Well, that was, so there's two. So I'm definitely on the right trail here. I just need to go look at those events, 2 or more events. I'll say key equals *tar.gz. So there's more than 2. So look at some of these. And since there's 25 instead of 2, I'm going to probably have to do a little bit of analysis on this, get a feel for what's going on. So I'll pick out some fields that I think are important. Time is obviously important. Requester is probably important. Key is definitely important because it's got what we're looking for. Operation, and most importantly, object size. Those are probably the fields that I want to put in here. And that looks like this. And we're going to want to get those object sizes into the right format. They wanted us to round the 2 decimal places, but you don't want to just chop the digits off. You have to use the byte conversion. So I will take object size and divide it twice by 1024. Now there's 2 ways to do this. You can do an eval command, which will actually override the value. There's another way, there's another command that works very similar called field format, and that just changes how it's displayed to you. It doesn't actually change the value in the underlying data. So that's my preference, is to use field format. And just to kind of call out the difference here, I'm actually going to call it object size 2. And I definitely want to sort by time. Usually the first thing to happen is the right answer. So that looks to be about right. We're rounding to the 2nd decimal place of the object size, which was in bytes, then it became in kilobytes, then it became megabytes. So we're in the right format. And so our answers here on this page somewhere, it's probably going to be closer towards the top because we sorted by time. And so it's probably one of these first 2 because they're about a half hour apart. The key piece of information for me really is the put here. One's a get and one's a put. And since we're talking about a tar.gz that was successfully uploaded, this is what I'm leaning towards, is this 2.93 right here, because it's the tar.gz file, which we are looking for in our compromised bucket. And we're doing the correct conversion, so everything looks right. So I want to take 2.93. Which one's the answers? This was 206, and we're looking 293. 293 is correct. We'll go check the hints for 206. And so they're actually calling out something I didn't really go after, and that's the requester of the upload, which is here. We can see who's doing it here. So yeah, I didn't leverage that, but you could leverage it too if it helps narrow down your results. But that's 205 or 206, excuse me. Question 208. A Frothy endpoint exhibits signs of coin mining activity. What is the name of the first process to reach 100% CPU processor utilization time from this activity on the endpoint? So we're looking for coin miner activity on an endpoint, and the symptom that we're looking for is 100% CPU utilization, and the process for it too. So CPU utilization is sounding like some sort of performance monitoring type stuff, so that's probably where we'll want to head. Again, just like all the other questions, we start off with scoping. It's always important to scope out where you want to take your search. The other questions were all related, but this one's going to go in a different direction. So here's all of the source types available to us. Perfmon, performance monitor, sounds pretty relevant. I think OS query is in here too, so if that doesn't pan out, OS query might be useful. Maybe top, I don't know, PS. We'll start off, CPU might be good. We'll start off with this one here. And so I'll use meta search just to get a feel for how much data there is. 806 isn't bad. Looks like it's all coming from one host, interestingly enough. So I'll just pull all that since it's not a lot. Just numbers everywhere. So this is pretty difficult to read, but Splunk's smart enough to parse out what all these numbers mean. So this is a really, really good application for that macro that we built called bird's eye view, because it's a lot. I'm not going to be able to extract out any of this. So let me just use it, bird's eye view. Gotta get rid of the leading pipe. And this will condense all those field value pairs down into something that I can work with a little bit easier. I probably should have anticipated that, but there's a lot of values. So what I'll probably want to do is narrow this down a little bit and search for, I guess, CPU in one of the field names. So I'll do like search field equals something with CPU in it. See where that gets me. So that actually took me almost all the way to the answer, just that one extra little bit on top of the bird's eye view. This is a critical field that I can start to search for, and I see the answers here for processor CPU utilization is 100. So this is my new criteria, is this field and that value. Of course, there's certainly going to be more than one because it's not unique for CPU to spike. So what I will want to do is get this into a table so it's easier to look at. And so I'll just pick out some critical fields in here that I want to look at. So to save time, I just picked fields that look interesting to me, and then I put them in a table, and now I will sort based on time. And so what's interesting to me here, well, this is going to contain our answer over here, the instance. It looks like it's got the processes, mostly Chrome. But the time is really, really telling. Now that we've sorted based on time, the first CPU spike happened about 4 hours. Yeah, about 4 hours ahead of the other ones. And so if this was coin mining activity, it would not max out the processor like once. Like it would probably peg that processor and keep it pegged. And that's exactly what we see here on. So that makes me want to discount this first entry just based on the temporal nature of all this. And sort of to kind of confirm our theory that this is coin mining, we see that it stays maxed out for a good while. So this definitely does look like we're on the right trail. So I want to say this is probably when it starts, and I'll probably come over here and grab Chrome 5. So this is probably the first process to reach 100%. That's probably related to the coin mining activity. This was 20. There was no question 207. So this 208 and Chrome 5. Yes. So we'll take a look at the hints. So they also say use perfmon. Okay, so there's some more to this besides just looking at that. It looks like they're actually going after the coin mining websites. So one thing that's common with coin mining is they'll call out to what's it called? I think it's called Coin Hive. Doesn't really matter. What you could do is you could look through all the web data for some key strings like coin or crypto or mine or mining. Just do something like that, and then you could identify one of these coin mining websites that they're looking at, and then use that to sort of bind your search window a little bit. I didn't go that route. I mostly did a temporal analysis on the only host that we had available, and it looks pretty obvious to me, but to each their own, I guess. So that's 208. We're probably gaming it a little bit because they basically told us that there was coin mining activity. I wouldn't use this process during like a normal security investigation. We basically told in advance that this was coin mining. Question number 209 is going to be our first 500-point question. So as you can imagine, it's going to be considerably more involved than the other questions. Probably going to involve multiple source types and some structured analysis, stuff like that. So 209 is when a frothy web server EC2 instance is launched via auto-scaling, it performs automated configuration tasks after the instance starts. How many packages and dependent packages are installed by the cloud initialization script. So pick out some keywords here that we might want to search for. Auto scaling is going to be useful. Maybe configuration, but that's probably going to show up in a bunch of logs. Instance start is probably where we're going to pick up to begin our search. And we're going to be looking for something for packages and dependencies. So as usual, the first thing I'm going to do is just do a little bit of scoping. And I'm probably going to begin with the CloudTrail logs. So this is where I'll probably start. And so I'll search the CloudTrail logs just for some keywords, specifically auto scaling and either package or packages. I don't get any hits, so I'm just probably going to drop this and get a feel for what the auto scaling activity is. Again, event name is kind of describing the event that's occurring here. And in this particular set of event names, I'm most interested in run instances. So I'll move run instance up to the search. And I'll still be looking for auto scaling stuff, but I'm not really sure where I want to go from here. So I'll fall back to my bird's eye view macro. And I'm still just doing a simple string search for auto scaling. I'm probably going to want to figure out the correct key value pair for that rather than just pulling it as a random string. So I'll just say search extracted values equals that. And so I see a bunch of fields that tell me when auto scaling is running instances. I could pick probably any of these, but I will go with this one and just say source IP address equals auto scaling. This way I'm not doing simple string search, I'm doing something a little bit more targeted. Just get a feel for how much auto scaling is responsible for running instances. It's only 6, so I'm probably just going to look at these. And there's a whole lot of fields still, but what I want to do here is I want to find some instance IDs to pick out of this auto scaling activity and then trace it. Because the question said that that it performs automated configuration tasks after the instance starts from when it's done through auto scaling. So I'm probably just going to pick an instance that is auto scaled or a group of instances that are auto scaled and just look for those dependencies. So rather than go through all these fields to try and find out which one's the right one, I'll just use bird's eye view and tell me which field name has instance ID in it. That would be this one right here. So this is going to be probably the field that I want to look at. And these are some extracted values that I probably want to try to trace. Now, at this point, you can pick each individual one of these and go through them until you find what you're looking for. I'm going to try and approach this a little bit more programmatically. So these are them again, and the first one is just a multi-value pair, so I'm going to want to probably expand that. Now at this point, I kept going through all of the AWS logs trying to find what I was looking for, and I could not find what I wanted, so I ended up taking a hint, and the hint reminded me that there's other CloudTrail logs available. So I'm going to take the hint for 209, and it's going to basically do what I just said, remind me that there's other cloud source types. So a lot of times the first hint is going to be like that. It's going to tell you a good source type to go leverage. In this particular case, it's going to point me towards basically the whole second half of my analysis. And so what I want to do is I want to go check out that log set, and it's very busy. It looks like it's mostly unstructured data and it's huge volume. What I notice is there's a field called hosts, which is to be expected, and they look like EC2 instances, but they have this prefix on them. So what I want to do is I want to take what I found in CloudTrail, which are instance IDs that are spun up through auto scaling, and I want to take that into this search. And I'm going to try and do that programmatically, but if you wanted to, you could pick each one individually. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to convert this field name to this field name, which is pretty simple. And I probably want to add an asterisk in front of all of these just to match this prefix they have here. So I'll do that real quick. So I've got that same list. I just used stats this time, and then I'm going to just add a prefix to the front of it so that it'll fit into my next search well. And then there's a useful command in Splunk called format, which will basically convert what you're looking at into a search. And so now, instead of me having to type all this out each time, I can either copy paste this in, or I can use this as a sub. So I'm going to start by using it as a sub search, just wrap it in brackets, and then put my main search up above it. So now I'm saying go through this data and only show me the auto scaling stuff. And so when this sub search expands, it's really the same as what we had here. It's just converting this into this. So for the sake of simplicity, for ease of following this, I'm just going to leave it actually like this. But the way I was originally doing it was with this sub search here. And I'm also searching for the keyword packages. It's going to be kind of hard to pick that out of 257 lines of code. But the highlighting that Splunk does really does help. This is probably what we're looking for here. It's installing 7 packages, 13 dependent packages. So I believe at this point the answer is probably going to be 7 and 13. I want to verify this because I only picked the first entry and there's 6. But I also don't want to go through all this code for each individual one. So I'll try and approach this programmatically just to simulate if you had a larger data set. But realistically, you probably could get away with manually reviewing it. I'm just going to try to use regex to say, come in here and grab this string, specifically looking for these 2 digits here, 7 and 13. Well, not specifically for 7 and 13, but for a digit. So I'll do that with rex like this. And so what I've got here is telling it to pull out the raw field because this big blob is not extracted. And look for install space and some digits followed by packages, or yeah, packages, and then pull out the second digit. So I'm pulling out packages as that first digit, which for this event was 7. Dependencies is the second digit, which was 13. And I just want to see if they are the same for all 6. I'm just verifying at this point. So we have packages here, and 7 is the same for 3 of the 6 events, and 13 is the same for 3 of the 6 events. So I didn't have to review half of them just by approaching this programmatically. But at this point, I've verified. I'm probably just going to verify a little bit further just to make it cleaner to see. And I'll do that by tossing it into a simple stats command just to sort of make it really, really clear what I'm looking at. So yeah, packages is 7 for all, 13. So I believe my answer is going to be 7 comma 13. How do they want it? Comma separated without spaces. So it'll be 7 comma 13 is what I believe is the answer. And we'll check right now. And I'll just submit request. So 7 comma 13 is the correct answer. And the hints. So here's the hint I took before. There's a second hint that they're just pointing you to some AWS documentation. So that wraps it up. That was a 500-point question, and we had to hop through 2 different source types. I didn't notice it till later, but you probably could have skipped all the CloudTrail stuff because the count was the same regardless. So you probably could have just gone straight to Cloud Init and tried to just um, pick out the right ones and look for the right dependencies, because it looked like all of the Cloud Init stuff was for auto scaling. So probably could have skipped the CloudTrail step, but that's 209. Question 210 is another 500-point question. It seems to be unrelated to the previous one. What is the short host name of the only Frothy endpoint to actually mine Monero cryptocurrency? So typically I like to come over here and pick a good source type to look through, but they didn't really give us a lot to go on with this one, so I'm not real sure where I want to take my search. I could probably start looking through any of these. So I'm going to go back to meta search and use it a bit differently than normal. And this time, the way I'm going to use it here is I'm not actually going to look for a source type. I'm going to look at all the source types and just throw a whole bunch of keyword strings at it, like crypto, cryptocurrency, coin, Monero, and CoinHive, just to see if any of the common cryptocurrency terminology shows up. And I've got a bunch to go through. I have 8 source types I want to look at, so I'll just pick PS off of the top, and I'll go look at PS. And this looks like a bad match, so I probably want to drop crypto as one of my search terms. It doesn't look related at all. So I'll go back, drop crypto out of here, and see what I got left. And I only went down to 3, so I'll do the same thing with a different source type. Again, drop crypto, and looking at stream DNS. And I see hits for CoinHive. So for anybody who may be unfamiliar with CoinHive, it was a popular service. So all this activity happened around 2018, and back then, a lot of times you would see callouts to CoinHive when there was crypto mining. I believe it was shut down in March 2019, so we might not see that anymore, but it makes for a really good search term here, and it looks like it's in the field called query. So I'll just ask what is going on with query. We got some related domains here that's probably really useful. So we probably want to pull in this thread and look at the data that is going to CoinHive. So that's what I've got here, just saying show me query going to CoinHive. And I'll probably just want to pick out which fields I care about and put it into a table just so it's a little easier for me to visually analyze. So that's what I've got here. Is just it's easier for me to look at it this way. And again, since I'm going after the host, this is probably the answer that I'm looking for. I probably just want to make sure it's the only one, just to make sure there's not a second host in there. Yeah, it's the only one. So I'm going to say B stol-L is probably what we're looking for as the answer to question 210. So we'll pull that answer for 210. And it is the correct one. And the hints for 210, what do I say? It's most common. This is where CoinHive comes from. It's pretty common for crypto miners. You can find DNS traffic, so they're pointing you to DNS here. CoinHive servers. So they're all pointing you towards CoinHive. So this is which one was this? This was 210. So question 211 is a 100-point question. Looks related to 210. How many cryptocurrency mining destinations are visited by frothy endpoints? We already have the answer to this one while we were going through 210. So we'll just format that a little bit. So again, we're just looking for the CoinHive stuff, and we'll just say, it tells us right here, it's 6. But we could do like a distinct count or something and just look at it. But there's 6 unique queries here. So we want to go check for 211. And answer 6. And the hints for 211. Yeah, so pretty straightforward. All right, I've been gone a while, but I'm going to try and pick back up with question 212. Using Splunk's event order functions, what is the first seen signature ID of the coin miner threat according to Frothy's semantic endpoint protection data? So we're going to pick out some keywords like normal here. It's talking about event order function, so we're going to want to check that out. We're going to want to look for a field that looks like signature ID. We can search for a keyword that's got miner or coin miner in there, and then probably go towards the semantic source types. The first thing we want to do is we want to check out what is an event order function. So the quickest way to do that is to just Google for it, and it takes you straight to the docs. Event order functions are first and last. It's not chronological. It's just the first one that shows up in the log. So it's important to this question not to be confused with earliest and latest, which are time functions. So earliest and latest are time, and first and last are event order functions. Both of these are stats functions, by the way. So we'll begin like we normally do, and we'll just see what what source types are available to us. In here, I'm just searching for some of the keywords that I saw in the question, SEP and semantic, and this is the list that I have to choose from. And so I'll just go ahead and search those same source types for some keywords I stole out of the question. Again, remember, you can't use wildcards very well with meta search. So I'm searching for miner or coin miner or crypto miner. And here's what I've got. I've got one hit for the risk file source type for this host. So I want to go and look at that. So I'm just going to basically drop meta search and look for this hit here. Everything's exactly the same, but there's no events. I knew this was going to fail, but I wanted to leave it in anyways. You got to be prepared for stuff to go sideways sometimes when you're doing capture the flag. And so when this happened to me, I just backed out and tried again. So it's telling me that the host is this. So I'm going to put that here. And the risk file is the source type, which is this one over here. So I'm still just trying to pull this one log that it says has my keyword in it. So I'm going to drop meta search, so I'm actually pulling the data. It's still not there. So I'm going to drop all my keywords. I'm literally just saying, give me that one thing that you saw. And here's my one event. And nowhere in here is the word miner. So this is just something you got to be careful of. It's very easy to be led astray sometimes. This definitely looks bad, but it's not a coin miner. So we want to double back and pick back up our search without sinking too much time into this question because it's taking us down the wrong path. So we went back to where we started and we're just going to drop our keywords and focus on the source type because the keywords didn't take us anywhere where we needed to go. So just say, show us the volume in these source types. It's about 20,000. That's too much really to do the bird's eye view or to mess around with the fields. So I'm gonna show you a different way to use the bird's eye view. And this is another really useful technique. This is something that I will typically put into a macro just to make my searching easier. And so what I've got here is just a normal bird's eye view macro. Now I gotta drop meta search. Meta search doesn't extract fields. Let me try again. So I got the standard bird's eye view macro here, and what I have done is, so there's two functions here that I'm applying to the normal extracted values that comes out of this macro I made. And what this is going to do is it's going to take all of the fields for extracted values and just filter those down to the ones that have the string miner in it. So to do this, I typically pair these together, match and MV field. So I'm saying, starting from the inside and working out, match this multi-value field. This is regex, so it's saying any character 0 more times followed by the string miner, followed by any character 0 more times. So that's going to match pretty much right here, and then allow anything on either side. This thing here is how you designate case insensitivity, also very useful to remember. So basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tell Splunk, look at all the fields and all the values and only show me stuff that has the string miner in it. And it gives me 3 fields that I can use to try and narrow my search. So I will delete those now that I know what my fields are, and I will search just for those. And I'm using wildcards on both sides because the one thing that's the same through all of them is they have JS coin miner everywhere. So that's my string. Alternative to this, you could literally just search for JS coin miner, but since I'm trying to be precise and I don't want to pull back false positives, which there probably won't be, I'm sticking with the strings or with the key value pairs here. And so I went from 20,000 results to 46 results, and these are the results that I want to look at. So I'm going to put it into a table for easy viewing, which looks like this. And you'll notice that it's not in chronological order. So you got 9, 45, 54, 9, 46. So 45, 46, 43. So we don't want to sort it. We want to do what the question said, and we want to use the event order function. So the question was, using Splunk's event order function, what was the first seen signature ID? So we're going to use first. We're going to use first against that signature ID. And I'm including earliest just because, no real reason. So you'll see here the first one that it saw was 30358. The earliest one it saw, chronologically speaking, was 30356. So that's the gotcha of this question, is just using first instead of earliest. So we're going to go ahead and try and submit this as our answer. So come over here to my macro, pull in 212. and we're looking for 30358, which is the correct answer. So the main thing here is using first against those logs once you've got it narrowed down well enough. Let's take a quick look at the hints. 212. Just to see what they tell us. Anything good? So they're saying use security file as a source type and use first scene as first. So same documentation page that we have here. So that's 212. The main thing is just using the right functions with your stats command. Question 213, according to Symantec's website, what is the severity of this specific coin miner threat? So it's going to be based on 212. So we don't need to do any scoping. We're just going to build off of our previous question. And so this is the data from 212. I'm just looking for the same signature ID that I used in 212. And what I'm going to do is I want to look for the severity stuff. So I'm just going to do bird's eye view again. I'm just going to control F for sev for severity. And there's two. So there's a field called severity and the value is high. It's a potential answer. And then there's vendor severity, which sounds more relevant to the question, and that's a major. Unfortunately, both of these are wrong. Neither one of these is the correct answer. So you have to be careful. In the question, they say, according to Symantec's website. So if this answer could be derived from the logs, they would not explicitly state that. So this is one of those gotchas. You're actually going to have to go to the website. And so how do you get to anything on the internet? You just Google around for it. So I just go to Google and I search on this string, which just to be clear is coming from the logs, the signature here. So I want to search for this. So here I go. I want to search. There's a bunch of websites, community. So this is like a forum, which I don't really want to look at forums. I don't want to look at Mozilla questions. So here's one that it's got the string in it, so it looks like it might be relevant. And I check it out. It's also a forum. Not really interested in forums. Here's another one for Broadcom external article. So this looks all well and good. What I key in on right away is that there's appendix for semantic signatures. So this sounds, even if this page has the answer on here somewhere, which it actually might, I just want to click this. It just takes me lower into the article. So I probably should have just control F for what I'm looking for. Let me just grab that string again and search for the string. And so here's the string that was in the logs, which is going to take me over here to attack signatures, and I'll just do it again. So I'm on their website. I'm looking at the correct signature, and the actual correct answer is medium, not high and not major. So you actually have to go to the website and do all that stuff I did, and then you'll get the actual correct answer of medium. So this was 213. And the answer is medium, and we'll check out the hints here and see if they're good. Oh, their first hint is actually to go to Google. Instead, they say to Google for semantic. That's probably a good idea. You could also use site : and then like semantic.com or broadcom.com, and that's hard to say. That'll help you narrow it down a little bit. Or the second hint just takes you straight to where you can control F for the answer. So if you want to be really quick for maybe half the points or so, or a third of the points, you could just take two hints and it'll point you right where to go. Yeah. So that's 213. Question 214 is the last 100-point question that's on this cryptocurrency thread here. What is the short host name of the only Frothy endpoint to show evidence of defeating the cryptocurrency threat? So we don't have to do any new searches. We already have, we're looking at results from Semantic. So Semantic's going to catch and defeat this. So what we really just got to do is look at the query that we already built and figure out what the host is that's detecting this. So if it's calling it JS coin miner, that means it's defeating it because it's detecting it, hopefully. But if you wanted to be sure, there's usually a field in here called action or something, or yeah, action. So action is blocked. So we're sure at this point that it was defeated. We just got to figure out what the host is. Looks like it's probably this. And we can also, it's also the host name. So it's in a couple places, but it looks like the answer is going to just be, based on what we were already looking at. What is the host name of the logs that we were pulling? 214. And that is the correct answer. So we'll take a quick look at the hints for 214, even though we didn't really need much. Figure out what applications were blocked. It's pointing me to a different source type actually. It looks like there's probably something under the application source type that's probably going to tell us it was blocked. But I mean, the semantic logs also tell us it was blocked. So you could use this source type as well for this question. Question 215 is a 500-point question, so that typically means you're going to have at least two parts to it. 215 is, what is the FQDN of the endpoint that is running a different Windows operating system edition than the others? So we'll start off like we always do, just scoping. And because they told us that this is a Windows system, first thing I'm going to do is just look at all the source types for anything that's got Win in it. I don't really expect this to be a surefire way to find the answer because Windows logs could probably show up in a bunch of these source types that don't have Win in it. But I've got some that do, so they make a good starting point. I got these three here. So I'll take those three and then I'll just try to get a feel for the volume to see what my next step should be. So I'm just saying, um, what's the volume for these three particular source types? And it's way too high for me to tackle them all together. So I'm probably just gonna try and take a real quick look into all three one at a time. I'll just start with this one since it's about 70% of the logs. So starting with Win hostmon and just capping it at 5,000 sample events, I can kind of get a feel for what's in here. There's a lot of empty values. I'm looking for Microsoft Windows something, so this seems really suitable for using bird's eye view again. So I'm just gonna do that real quick. And it's better. It's a lot more concise, but it's still 2 pages, and there's a lot in each one. So I'm gonna probably search against extracted values for Microsoft Windows, since that's what they were telling us was the operating system. So I'm just trying to narrow it down a little bit, make it a little bit easier to read. Just search for it at this point. Not relevant, relevant. So there's 2 fields here that look like they have what I'm looking for. They're both the same field, just one's capitalized and one's not. So if I'm looking for the one that's different, I'll probably want to do something with stats, maybe something like show me all hosts by operating system, and then I'll look for the operating system that's only got one in it. Windows, because they told us it was Windows, and then stats values, the hosts by OS. And so everybody's using Windows 10 Pro except for this one here. But that's not the FQDN, so I don't have the full answer yet, but let's at least go look at this with host equals that. And if we're lucky, it will have the full FQDN in here, but it doesn't look like it does. All I see is the short one. So what I did, I used the same trick here that I used during the actual capture the flag, and I just kind of took the shotgun approach and let regex do all the hard work for me. So what I've got here is, please don't run this type of search in a production environment or it might explode. But I took the answer that I had and I searched all source types, and I just pulled back just raw. So I said, don't do any field extraction because I don't care what field it's in. You could have probably tackled this through bird's eye view against a bunch of different source types if you wanted, but I don't know what source type's going to have the FQDN. So I'm saying give me all source types with this string in it, which apparently is actually a pretty decent filter. And then in that raw, I want you to extract this string followed by a literal dot. So it's bstol-l dot followed by anything. I don't care what comes after it. And just show me all those. Really easy to, the answer jumps up straight away, along with a whole lot of noise. But I mean, I got what I came for. Capture the flag is typically smash and grab, so doing something quick like this is probably excusable for a capture the flag. Don't do it in a production environment, but this is probably what we're looking for. This was for 215. So that is a quick and dirty way to get the FQDN. So I'm going to skip the 1,000 point questions just in the interest of saving time for right now. I'm actually going to jump down to 219. I got to come back to this one. I don't think I actually looked at 218 yet. But I'm going to jump down to 219 for right now. Bud accidentally commits AWS access keys to an external code repository, something like GitHub probably. Shortly after, he receives a notification from AWS that the account has been compromised. What's the support case ID that Amazon opens on his behalf? So we're going to pick out some keywords here. We want to look for maybe access keys, repository, compromised, something from AWS. But the main thing is if Amazon is notifying us, it's going to be through email. So we just want to go and see what are our email source types. So a little bit of scoping here, just saying using metadata to show me all my source types and then filtering it down on mail or SMTP. And it looks like most of them are going into a stream SMTP source type, so that's where we'll go next. And so what I'll do here is I'll search that one source type that looks to be related to mail for some keywords. I got AWS or AWS spelled out, and I have some compromised keys, so I'm just going to search for some of those key terms, just seeing if I get any results back that look relevant. I got 2 hits, so I'll come down here and check this out and see if it looks like it's accurate. So this could be the case number. We would like to see the body here. So look for something, it's content body. So it's probably relevant information in here. So we can see the whole thing here. And it is telling us that our account is compromised. It is talking about posting to GitHub. By the way, you probably want to go and grab this because I was poking around on this GitHub page and there's a lot of really useful information that's up there. So for the capture the flag, you can probably pivot around on something like this. But for this answer in particular, the case ID is right here. Again, I can't recommend that enough. You really do want to go and just pivot around just this whole GitHub page. That's extra stuff. So we'll come over here to answers for, what is this, 219? 219, right. And we'll go check out the hints too, just to see if it's anything useful. And they give us the source type. So that's 219. Definitely check out that GitHub page. Question 220. AWS access keys consist of 2 parts, an access key and a secret key. What is the secret access key of the key that was leaked to the external code repository? So 220 is building on 219, so we can probably just pick up where we left off, and we have that email. All we've got to do is just follow the link in the previous segment. I was telling you to check out that GitHub page. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. We're just going to follow this link to GitHub, and this is what Bud posted to GitHub, and we have our access key and our secret access key. So that was basically the whole core of the question here. So this is probably our answer, secret access key. So we'll come over and check for 220. we got the same. So now what I would recommend you do is you actually back out of here and just kind of poke around. There's always good stuff and stuff like this. So you gotta dump.csv, which looks like some customer information. I would save this off during your CTF. You don't know how this might prove to be useful, but you might end up using this to answer another question. We already looked at this. You have architecture diagram. This is always helpful. There's mavasig.png. To me, this looks like somebody's calling card for a defacement, so that's kind of interesting. We might want to save this image in case if it comes up again later. This one looks interesting. Another screenshot. In here, we've got incident notification where SOC manager is talking about how customers had their information leaked. So this is definitely something we want to save off for later in case we need it at some other point in our capture the flag. Most importantly, we have the brewery diagram here, and with this single screenshot alone, we can make our own alcohol. So that's definitely a plus, especially for capture the flags. So what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll save off all this stuff, especially these credentials, because you don't know how you can use these later. And then I will have them available to either the rest of my team in case someone else is working one of those questions, or I might use this. This is probably something that's going to be useful for like a 500 point or a 1,000 point question. So I'll save that for later. So we didn't have to wait long. It looks like question 221 is going to be making use of that .back file we were talking about. So 221. Using the leaked key, the adversary makes an unauthorized attempt to create a key for a specific resource. What is the name of that resource? So if you want to, you can start like we normally do with some scoping, but for this, I'm going straight to CloudTrail just because I know CloudTrail is going to have this type of stuff in it. So I'm going to go search AWS CloudTrail source type for this string that we got out of GitHub, because this is definitely a unique string. And so that'll look like this. There's 10 whole events, but I don't know which field it's going to be in, so I'm going to lean on bird's eye view to help me out here. Probably just search for where this is, like this. So I got 2 fields, and since this is the compromised key, I'm looking for it to be used. So I'm looking for this one, not for requests against it. So I know what the key value pair is. It's going to be this. That should narrow things down a little bit. I still want to stick with bird's eye view because I'm not quite where I want to be just yet. And what I really want to do at this point, now that I've narrowed down the CloudTrail logs just to the compromised key, is to go look at event name, which will kind of describe the log that you're looking at. It's a very good field for AWS analysis. And this is what we're looking for. We're looking for event name for create access key, because the question was, there was an adversary makes an unauthorized attempt to create a key. So this is that. So we'll punch that in here. And I'm sticking with bird's eye view just because AWS logs are in JSON and they're kind of difficult to work with sometimes. So I'll just use bird's eye view to make it a little bit easier. And so the adversary makes an unauthorized attempt to create a key for a specific resource. I'm just going to control F for resource. And I have an error message here, which kind of fits with the way they described the scenario. Not authorized to permit on resource null web admin. So this looks to be the name of the resource that I'm looking for. So I'm going to submit this as my answer. And that is correct. So the hints just basically point you to CloudTrail as well. So that's 221. 222 is continuing on that same thread. Using the leaked key, the adversary makes an unauthorized attempt to describe an account. What is the full user agent string of the application that originated the request. So we want the user agent string, and we're looking for a describe probably in the event name. So we're going to just pick back up right where we left off. We left off with event name equals create key. The way we got here was just looking for event names under that compromised key. So we'll just do that again. Same thing we did before. Go down to event name, and we've got a describe event here. So we'll just do that instead of the other one. And we're going to stick with bird's eye view. And as we're looking through here, there's some error messages. So it looks like we do have the right event. There's only one, and it was an unauthorized operation. So that's great. And we want the user agent string, so we'll just control F for user agent, and this is what we're looking for. So we'll submit this for 222, and that is the same. And the hints for 222 are the same as they were for 221, so just use CloudTrail for your source type. So 223 is a 500-point question, so it'll be a little more involved, probably have a couple moving parts in it. The adversary attempts to launch a Ubuntu cloud image as the compromised IAM user. What is the code name for that operating system version in the first attempt? There's a lot of important words that we want to pull out of here. So Ubuntu cloud image, so we want to look at the AMI for CloudTrail, which is the Amazon machine image. They also switched it up here, and they're talking about the compromised IAM user, whereas before they were talking about the key. So we'll probably want to go grab that user and include that in our search. They're also talking about the first attempt. So like the previous question, we'll probably want to use the first with our stats. To begin, we'll have to go grab that IAM user. Like they wouldn't switch from leaked key to IAM user unless it was important. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is the same that we were looking at for 222. We'll just come down here looking for a user field. We have a username as web admin. So in addition to searching for this access key, we'll also search for the compromised user of that access key. We'll stick with bird's eye view for now. And just like before, we'll go down to event name, and they're talking about adversaries launching instances. So we want to look for something called run instance in the event name. You can search for it directly, but if you're not super familiar with the AWS logs, you could just come down here and look for an event name that sounds like what they're describing, and this is probably the only one. So we'll take this and pull it up into our search. So we did that. We dropped out of bird's eye view because we've got 3 filters at this point. We're dealing with 576 logs, so I'll probably just toss it into a table to make it easier to read. And what I did here is I went through some of the logs and I picked out what fields are most interesting to me. Obviously, the image ID has the AMI, so that's what I wanted the most. Alternative to this, you could stick with a bird's eye view. If you didn't want to build the table, you could stick with this technique and just look for AMIs in here. And this will tell you the field name. This will tell you some of them. You still don't know which one's the first one that was requested. So you'll have to run the stats first command against this field, which will look like this. So running first, and this is the first AMI. So that's the first half of the question. The 500-point questions tend to be 2 parts to them. So we have to convert this to the code name for that operating system. So you just go over to Google and start searching around for AWS and that ID. This was the CTF for this, I think, was in 2018. So back in 2018, this probably worked really well. Just you punch in the number, and you'd get the entry, but it didn't work for me, or it didn't have the full name anyways. It's got part of the name. But what I kept doing is I just kept searching around, and I just eventually stumbled across another site, and it had the full name, I think, under release code. If I scroll over a little. So I'll search for that here. So this is my AMI, and then the code name is, the full code name is this. So this is probably what I'm looking for. Just had to search. It took a little while for me to actually find this because it's a little bit older. Because it's 2020 right now, and it was 2018 when this was released, I think. But I'll take this as my answer for 223, which is correct. And the hint for 223 is just the same as it's been for all the other ones so far. Just go to CloudTrail. So we left off with 223. I'm generally skipping the 1,000 point questions for now. I'll probably plan to do a video on those later when I actually do them. But I skipped this one, and I didn't really even try this one because I didn't know what they were really talking about here. I didn't have enough context to actually begin my search. So I just continued on with the 300 point questions. However, I'm going to stop the video here and push this video out for the 200 series questions, and I'll probably try and get back to the 300 point questions later on. Just real quick comment, if you find this video helpful to you at all, please find a way to let me know somehow. I'm probably only going to pick up the 300 point questions if there's actually any interest in it. I do not have infinite time, but if there is an interest in me continuing this series, I will continue through the 300 point questions and also come back to the 1,000 point questions if anybody wants that. But I've already got a lot of time sunk into it so far, so I'm going to try and push this video out now with what I've got and see if I can come back to more later. So let me know if you find this helpful, and stay tuned for more. See ya.